Hi, good morning. My name is Merlin. I'm doing my doctorate in clinical psychology with neuro concentration in Walden University. And also I'm having experience and working with special education kids who having autism spectrum disorders or having developmental disabilities, learning disabilities and the problems in communications and problems in the learning skills and they're having they don't know how to talk, they don't know how to react, they don't know how to respond, and we human beings having the brain and we having normal functions, and we know how to think, and we know how to react, we know how to respond, we having empathy, we have emotions, and we can talk and we can react to the sentence, react to the situations. And some of the child or some of the adults who having cognitive difficulties or the problems with the brain, so they don't know how to think, they don't know how to react, they don't know how to respond to the sentence or respond to the situations, and they don't have any feelings towards others, no sympathy, no empathy, nothing. Even though some kids, they don't know how to how to tell their primary concerns, or example, if they want to go to the bathroom, or if they're having some basic issues, they don't know how to tell to the teacher, how to tell to the parents, and they simply, what they're doing is with the actions. They're pulling out the ear, they're doing something with the hair, and they're just doing the reactions or responding towards the stimuli, what they need. The stimuli is their need, but they don't know how to react with that, so they're just doing the actions. So if you're working with them over, the first stages, and we don't know what's going on, it's really complicated, it's really challenging. But when we use working with the kids, those who having, the autism or the autistic spectrum disorder, so we can understand what their primary need. So today, I would like to share about the autism spectrum disorders or the autistic child or autistic adults. Even United States, it's very common, and we can see more than 3 million year cases per year 3 million cases. And this diagnosis actually is rarely in the medical, if we having any medical problems, we having the lab test, and we can get the ultrasound and everything. But these mentally challenged kids or the challenged disease or the cognitive disability, we don't have any medical test or lab test. Only through the behavior observation, assessment, and we need to understand the origin. That means how the causes, how the risk factors, and let me tell you something about the autism disorders first, and we can share about how we can diagnose, how we can identify whether your kid having these autistic disorders. And the early diagnosis and the early interventions leads to early treatment. Otherwise, the delaying the developmental issues or delaying the treatment, delaying the diagnosis is really going to the complications. So we'll start. What is actually autistic spectrum disorders? We usually heard the words autism. Always we say, oh, she's a autistic child, and she having some, the cognitive issues. She having some developmental issues. And what is autistic spectrum disorders? It is a developmental disorder. It's a disorder of the brain. Neurodevelopmental. Neuro means it's affecting the brain. And what else having with these developmental affection? First, they're having difficulties in the social interactions, communications, and the main thing is the repetitive patterns of the behavior, repetitive actions. We have one child in our school. Actually, she always she doing repetitions, what she's saying, what she doing, and when she come into the class in the morning, she always say, oh, good morning, Miss R. And 5 minutes apart, she always say, good morning, Miss R. And again, we say, good morning, Miss R. That is the repetitive patterns or repetitive behaviors. Even we saying, or even we tell them, oh, it's done, it's good, it's already been good afternoon, but they don't want to hear. They still want to continue their words, still want to continue their behavior actions, still want to continue their patterns, in their talk. So still she say, still, even in the evening or good afternoon, she say, oh, good morning, Miss R, because that was the repetitive patterns of thought and the behavior. And we can see three things in autistic child. If the child having autism, we call autistic child. So, for example, if the child is sitting in the chair, what we say? Oh, the child who is sitting in the chair, right? So same like the autistic child. So they having difficulties in the social interactions and repetitive movements. Some childs they're doing like this always, like the repetitive handshaking, and they're doing their head like a spinning like this. They're always moving their head, moving their hands, and they're rocking. That is the main symptoms. And second things was who doesn't speak, and they're having delayed speech. And the third thing, they don't understand what we're saying and they don't follow the directions. If the normal child we can see, we say, okay, come here and go and do this. They follow the directions. But this autistic child, they cannot able to understand what we're saying and the questions, and they don't follow our directions. And the fourth, I would like to say, easily aggressive or disruptive. If they're doing something and we going and interacting, or against their actions, they suddenly become aggressive, and they're doing some temper tantrums like actions. So these are the main symptoms of autistic kids. So let's see. Let's talk about more about autistic spectrum disorders. And I always say it's a developmental disorder, the brain disorder, and it's affecting the social, communication, the behavior challenges. And in our society or some of the cultures, even though they know their kids having these characters or these symptoms, they cannot able to accept the reality. The reality is important. Understanding the reality is important for early intervention, and it prevents always the complications. Some of our cultures, even in India, or different cultures or different ethnical groups, they cannot able to understand or accept these kind of cognitive difficulties. Maybe it's due to their culture, due to their a belief or some things. But I would like to say, if we need to understand more about in the early stages, it is really helpful for getting the treatment faster. In the US, we have lot of like special education centers and early interventions programs, and even in India we have like a primary health centers, in the community areas, the rural areas, the remote areas, they're having primary health centers. So if we having concerns about our daughter, son, or any child we know who doesn't speak, doesn't talk, doesn't walk, and having speech difficulties earlier stage, usually we can identify these symptoms in the 18 months. Some kids we only understand like even the 2 year or 3 year. So we need to talk with the child doctor, so they will refer to the special services, so it's really helpful. So that's my main aim. If you see these kind of symptoms in your child or neighbor or friends, you need to talk with the child doctor, and the doctor can refer to the special services. So what I'm gonna say is, um, so it is really this ASD is really challenging, and some of the kids or some of the adults, they need a lot of care in their daily lives, and some others need less, they are independent. Even in the high school kids, they are independent, but in the elementary kids, in the preschool, like a 3 to 6 years, and they need a more care. So we need to understand their situation, understand their needs. Then only we can implement the plans for for the treatment. And we'll see. Okay, we got for the signs and symptoms. The main thing, signs and symptoms. So if you see these symptoms in your child, or if you see someone, a relative or someone in the family member or a friends, suddenly you need to talk with the child doctor. So this is the people with ASD often have some emotional, social and communication problems. The first thing is they won't point the object they don't interest. If you're showing them, oh, look at the sky, the aeroplane is going the sky, and if you don't have any interest in that, they won't look there. They're just looking down or looking somewhere else, and they not point at object to show interest. And next, they don't look at the object when others is showing them. They have particular interest. So if you're saying them, oh, look at there, oh, look at the baby is playing there, or look at the swing, we can go and play there, and they don't feel any interest. They don't show or they don't look at the objects when another person points at them. That's the second thing. And the third thing is they don't have any interest with other people at all. No interest. They always want to be alone. They always want to be sit. We have a lot of the childs in our class, and they don't like the social interactions or group interactions. They just want to sit quiet and sit alone. And if somebody is going to interact in their world, they're suddenly aggressive, and they don't like it. The changing facial expressions and the actions, we can know it. They didn't like it. They don't interest. That was the next thing. And the fourth thing was they always avoiding the eye contact if you're talking with them. If you're talking to the kids having or child having autism, they won't direct contact with our eyes. They're just sitting. Oh, okay, we're talking, right? So we're talking, and to the child, they're just looking like this. They're not properly contacted in our eyes. And the next thing was they don't actually feelings about others feelings. They don't have any empathy. If example, if they're having any groups, or the kids were sitting together and somebody getting easily bruised, or somebody is sick and they don't have any affection, they don't have any sympathy. If they talking to them also, oh, your friend is sick and your friend is having bruises, and they don't know, they just their own world. They don't. So that means they have a trouble understanding other feelings, self-importance. And the next is the main thing, we should identify the autism spectrum disorder is. They appear to be unaware when people talks but respond to other sounds. Example, if we're talking to the child who having autism, okay, what was the breakfast, or how was the day going, and they don't listen to us. They're just telling, oh, something is going on here. I just hearing something. Oh no, in the certain directions they're just looking, and they're hearing some other sounds instead of talking with me. Because that means they appear to be unaware when people talks, but they're just responding to the other sounds, like a hallucinations. Some people's been, right, like a visual hallucinations, or those who having any verbal hallucinations. They're looking surroundings, and they're talking some other persons, and because they're just seeing something is going on the wall or something, even we talking to them. So, and some kids, they're really interested with the kids, with the adults, with the teachers, but they don't know how to talk, how to play, how to relate it to them. That was other matter. So these are the signs and symptoms mainly having, the autism spectrum disorders. If any of the child having this in your family, in your community, suddenly you need to tell them, you need to show your child to the primary caregiver or the pediatrician. So it will help for the earlier interventions and earliest treatment. Next, we go into the diagnosis. As I said, for the medical, we can do the lab tests, ultrasounds, blood tests, and everything. But in the on the brain disorder or the mental disorders, we can diagnose only through the behavior and the developmental to make a diagnosis. We need to observe their behavior pattern. We need to assess it and we need to do the implementation. Only to the observation, only through the assessment, we can diagnose the behavior. That's why some child we can detect this status like early in the stages of 18 months. By the age 2 they diagnosed by the experienced professional. It will be helpful. Some older child do not receive the final diagnosis until much the older. The early diagnosis, early treatment, good, less complications. And let's go to the treatment. There is currently no cure. The research continues, right? So there is no cure for the ASD, but the early developmental treatment can improve the child development. I always say early intervention treatment, early prevention is better than cure, right? As I always say in the English, we always say in the phrase like early intervention, early prevention is better than complication. So we need to talk to the child doctor as soon as possible if you think having the ASD or they're having any problems in developmental patterns or the above signs and symptoms I mentioned. And even if your child is not diagnosed with the ASD, sometimes she may be, helpful or eligible for the early intervention program like a special education program like a preschool education, special education. So, they can modify their behavior patterns even they're getting older. And I would like to say some of the clients or some of the parents coming to us and asking that, my family, nobody having these symptoms and you were completely perfect and in a family, even dad or mom, then how come my child having ASD or autism spectrum disorders? The answer is clearly some scientists, usually it causing by three: biological, environmental, and three things, and the genetic. Most scientists say because of the genetic factors like a chromosomal abnormalities, it will be, it's a main cause. And the second things, if the child having any sibling, sister or brother having ASD or autism spectrum disorders, it follows the next generation. And the third is I would like to say, if they're having any certain chromosomal conditions like tuberous sclerosis, fragile X chromosomes, they gotta get this. And the next one is if the mother having any depressions or anxiety in the pregnancy and they're just taking two drugs mainly, just mentioned valproic acid and thalidomide. If they're taking two drugs, anxiety or depression drugs, the child may get ASD. And the next is the main thing, the child born to the parents who having older, the greater risk. Some child, some parents conceiving like about 40 years, about 50 years or 35 years, they're having more risk for getting ASD child, autism spectrum disorder. So these are the main causes and the risk factors for getting the child ASD. And it is continues, the research continues, and it's a public problems in the world, not only in the US, in the world. But I always say, even in the USA, we have early interventions and special educations. Then a seed means a study to explore the early developmental development, because they're just looking at the many possible risk for the ASD, including the genetic. They're just researching how it's coming, what's the causes, to genetic, to hereditary, to environmental or any behavioral factors, and who is affected. We need to find out who is affected this ASD. And some of the clients in the community areas, on the remote areas, they say, we don't believe this because racial groups or ethnic groups, we won't get it. Then how come our child get it? But no discrimination. It affects all the ages. It affects all the ethnic groups. It affects all the racial, socio-economic groups. But four times more, if we go into the sexual differentials, four times more boys than the girls. Okay, so finally, I would like to conclude. If you are concerned, if you think the child might have ASD or these signs and symptoms or any causes or risk factors you having, you need to get the more depth evaluation. First, talk with the child pediatrician. Second, if the child pediatrician is not going to assess the child more deeply, they will refer to the clinical neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist, child neurologist, or developmental pediatrician doctors who special training in the developmental or the children with the special needs. At the same time, we have the state public early childhood system for request a free evaluation if you think the child, the family, the neighbors having this ASD. So thank you so much and thanks for watching, and please sharing this news for the early interventional programs for the special education kid, because it's a public problem. This our child, our children, this our generation. We need to treat as soon as possible for the preventing the further complication. Thank you so much. Please continue watch my videos. Thank you.